Hello classes, Mrs. Testa here. I'm terribly sorry I can't be with you today. Third period. You need to complete the exit ticket on classroom.google.com. I think it's the Variations WebQuest or WebQuest exit ticket. Then you need to complete the green graphing sheet. Fourth and fifth period, you don't need to do any kind of exit ticket. Just get started with that green graphing sheet. All classes, when you are done with that green graphing sheet, put it into the bin. Substitute, if you wouldn't mind pausing the video to give everybody time to finish that green graphing sheet. Thank you. Before your adaptations quiz. Oh my goodness, a quiz. Yes, it was on your pinky. You knew about this for, let's see, 3 whole science days now. Alright, quick review just in case you aren't ready. 3 examples. Is it structural, behavioral, or physiological? Now don't shout it out. Think for your own brain and see if you're ready for this quiz. Number 1. When a mother deer runs away from danger, her tail automatically flicks up to show the white patch underneath. This makes it easy for her fawn to follow them to safety. Now think, is this a structural adaptation? Is it a body part? Is it a behavioral adaptation? Is it something she's doing on purpose? Or is it a physiological adaptation? Something that happens automatically? Got your hypothesis? Are you ready? Here comes the answer. It is physiological. It is, yes, it is a body part. But what's happening here is it's automatic. So it becomes a physiological adaptation. Alright, round 2. In wintertime, many frogs bury themselves in the mud to survive the cold weather. Decide, is this a structural, a behavioral, or a physiological adaptation? Think about it. Got your hypothesis? Ready for the answer? It is behavioral. This is a choice. This is what the frogs are choosing to do to keep themselves alive. Alright, last one. Number 3. The feathers of birds have a great ability to repel water. It does not soak in. Is this a structural, a behavioral, or a physiological adaptation? Are you ready? Here we go. That's right, it's structural. We need, the last example. So this is a part of the body that helps this bird to survive. My darling substitute, if you would pause at this point in this broadcast and allow students to finish the quiz, and then we'll pick up right here when they are done. Thank you. Open up your unit packs to page 37 and 38. Substitute, if you need to pause and make sure everybody has this out on their desks, that would be a good time to do so. 37. Here we go. Up in the right-hand corner of your page, you'll see a box labeled Resources. You should write. Resources are the stuff in the environment needed for survival. These are often limited. They can be used up. Let's explore these more closely. Here we have an environment in which this little organism, a fish, lives in. Let's label these 4 resources for this fish. These bubbles represent. Can you guess? I hope so. All organisms need air. Air of some kind. You should label in that box air and draw in the bubbles so that this little organism can breathe on your paper. Up next, food. This organism apparently eats smaller fish, and so these smaller fish become his food. Up next, a mate. Haha, isn't that cute? Add a bow, add some lips, make it so it looks like this organism has a nice mate to hang out with. Remember, we are talking about an entire species here. Yes, that organism, this one fish, does not need a mate to survive, but he needs a mate for the species to survive. Last but not least, shelter. And yes, I want you to draw something that these fish can live in. Hey, if leaves aren't your thing, draw them a house. Hey, it can be a symbol, it can be a model for the place where these fish are going to live. Alright, so resources are the stuff, the air, the food, the mate, the shelter that a species needs to survive. Up next, angry fish. It's all about competition. Competition is the effort of two or more organisms acting independently to get resources that are in short supply. When resources run low, organisms need to fight and compete for the resources. Classic example, these two battering rams are fighting over mates. They want to be the organism that gets to mate and reproduce. Variations are differences in shape, structure, or function. Different kinds of one trait. Variations are caused by sexual reproduction or by mutations. This deer has a variation, right? You may have seen these down, there's a park near Watkins Glen, you'll see a lot of white deer. So they are different, they have a variation in their fur color. Alright, speaking of adaptations, an adaptation is excuse me, a useful trait that helps an organism to survive, which gives it an advantage in its environment. Not just any old trait, one that is useful. Got it all written down? Alright, now you do. Let's go. Camouflage is an adaptation. Can you see this? Is my projector showing this beautiful black moth on this black tree? He blends in very well. Useful trait. Swimming in a school of fish. That is a behavioral adaptation, which is useful, which helps these fish to survive. Overpopulation is too many organisms in one environment. These organisms may have all sorts of different variations, but ultimately it can lead to competition. You're fighting over the resources in that environment. Alright, turn that page. Let's talk about this big idea. Put it all together. What is natural selection? Start with overpopulation. Overpopulation can lead to competition. Many organisms that are fighting for the same resources. But all of these turtles, all fighting for the same shelter, the same food, the same mates, the same air. Alright, step 2. As a result of overpopulation. Due to competition, some organisms with their useful traits will be able to live on. Right? A speedy fish, that's a useful trait, may be able to get away from predators or sneak in and get the food first. But others will die. Sorry. This slow fish, or perhaps just not as speedy, doesn't have a useful trait, will not help him get the food, and therefore he will die. This is called the survival of the fittest. That does not mean the most like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not the fittest, not the strongest, not the fastest, but the one that is most useful in the environment. This is also called the survival of the fittest. Not fittest as in I work out. No, that's not how it works. Fittest as in fits the environment. You need to be speedy. Those who are speedy will survive. You need to be small. Those who are small will survive. You need to be brown. Those who are brown will survive. Okay? There is not a place to write this. However, it is a good thing to note. So I might write that under those little dead and speedy fishes on your page. Also called the survival of the fittest. Alright. So, the usefulness of a trait depends on the resources and environment. A trait that is useful in one location, one environment, may not be useful somewhere else. Alright, this guy with his brighter stripes. Useful, it may be helpful in attracting a mate. Or perhaps it is camouflage, depending on where the environment is. If it is not camouflage, it's the opposite, making this fish more visible to predators. This guy with his skinny body. It will be useful if the environment has many small holes. You could hide in or live in those holes. However, he might not be so strong. He might not be able to defend himself or attack another fish if needed. Alright, the speedy swimmer. It would be helpful for him to be able to escape quickly, go get to his shelter and hide from a predator. But he needs a lot of food. It takes a lot of energy to be quick. Alright, if you need a moment to write all these things down, please pause the video so you can get this all written down. Number 3. So, overpopulation leads to competition. Competition leads to better traits, getting the food, and surviving. Organisms that have the useful traits, those adaptations, will survive and then reproduce. If you do not have a trait to help you, you will die. If you do have traits to help you, you will survive in the environment. They can then pass on their traits to their offspring. These are supposed to be like the babies of these two parents. Okay, so we have two parents with a speedy trait, passing on the trait for speediness to their children. So, those without useful traits, sadly, die off. Oh, don't you wish you had useful traits now? Those with useful traits will have children who also have those useful traits. And so we start to have a population with more speedy fish, with more skinny-bodied fish, because those are the traits that are useful, that are helpful. Alright, our end result, the ending, the final, the finale of natural selection. The environment now has a lot more organisms that have certain traits. This is natural selection. Nature chooses the traits that will increase in the population. The environment, the resources, will define which traits are the most useful, therefore surviving, therefore having children, therefore more of these traits in the population. We will continue thinking about this very idea and get more practice with it. But for this point, you should know these 4 big steps. Thank you, Natural Forces. Alright, there is an activity for you on classroom.google.com. Substitute, please give this class the rest of the time to complete that activity. If they finish early, they should be working on their vocabulary projects, or they can read silently or work on other homework. Thank you. Have a lovely day. I will see you all next class.